Missed an episode of your favorite podcast? Choose from over a decade of content in our archives, not just the latest episode. All free at gcnlive.com.
This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor@USAPrepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
Everyone all set, cocked, locked. Here we go. Your dial set correctly to USA Prepares. We're delighted you're with us in class today. Thank you for setting your dial to USA Prepares. Blake is engineering the broadcast in Minnesota. I'm Vincent Finelli, and if you'd like to call us, 866-582-9933, 866-582-9933. Guineith Isaacs is with us live in Australia. Welcome, Guineith.
Good morning, Vincent. How are you today?
I'm doing well, Guineith. And you?
I'm doing just fine. Yep. I'm still waking up a little bit.
Okay, well, I'll tell you what, while you're waking up...
1 a.m.
Yeah. Yep. While you're waking up, let me go into a discussion about a product that I purchased 2 of, and it's a significant purchase. Back in Virginia, I wanted to have a little easier way of working on our farm equipment and our vehicles and our trucks and so forth. We're farmers in Virginia as well as in Missouri. And so I wanted to buy a automotive lift. Put the car up in the air, or the truck up in the air and get under it, rather than jack up all 4 corners and, do it the way I used to do it when I was a lot younger. So I did a lot of research, and I determined that the best brand that I could find, if I were able to get it at a discount, would be just a little bit more expensive than a inferior brand. So I bought what I considered to be the best brand, and that is a brand by the name of Rotary. So the lift that I have on the farm here in Missouri, as well as the one I purchased in Virginia, were both Rotary lifts. And the one I bought in Virginia was called an asymmetrical lift, and the posts are tilted a little bit, not facing the vehicle, but they're tilted a little bit so you can open the doors if you need to get in and out of the vehicles while you're working on them.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a nice lift. It's 2 posts. It's anchored with these very heavy anchors into concrete floor, and you can just drive the vehicle into the right position. You balance the vehicle based on the front weight and the rear weight, and you just hit the button, and hydraulic lifts, hydraulic pumps, hydraulic fluid through the hoses and the hydraulic cylinders, and up the vehicle goes, and it has safety locks. And it's really neat. So the one that I purchased second was is exactly the same, except they decided, I think, to rate it for 1,000 pounds heavier, 10,000 pounds instead of 9,000. So literally, you could lift a truck that's, got some equipment in it, maybe a toolbox on the back, and, a full tank of fuel, that kind of thing. So the one I just bought, about 11 years ago, the hydraulic hoses started seeping. Now, when I say seeping, I mean leaking through the entire length of the hose, kind of like a soaker hose. Do you have those in Australia where you can water your garden? You have those, right, in Australia?
Yeah.
Soaker? Okay.
Yeah.
So
that's really
hydraulic
bad.
fluid. Yeah. So the hydraulic fluid is weeping or seeping out of the pores of this hose along the entire circumference and length of these hydraulic hoses. So I called Rotary, and they said, "Oh, okay. So we'll send you new ones, and it's $300." I said, "You got to be kidding me! These things, I've never seen a problem like this." I kind of thought that you guys would say, "Whoa, would it be okay if we sent you new ones?" Boy, we're so sorry for the problem because you got to drain all the hoses, and it's going to make a big mess. hydraulic fluid all over the place because it's impossible to do it without leaks on the floor. Would it be okay if they gave me a hard time? Ultimately, they decided that they would see it my way, and they sent me new hydraulic hoses. The hoses that they sent me were really nice. They were the exact length, and they said either designed in Italy, manufactured in China. Designed in Italy.
I was going to say they were made in China, weren't they?
They were. And so the replacement hoses have been leaking for years, just like the first one. So I just happened to be on the internet, and I was in one of those moods where I just kind of was seething a little bit. And I didn't want to seethe for very long, so I just searched for the Rotary Lift website, and they have this thing where you can send them a message. And I want to read the message I sent to them. And this is verbatim. Ready, set, quote. I purchased our SPOA 10 asymmetrical lift about 11 years ago, and I believe it's the best in the business. I would like to know why Rotary uses inferior hoses that are designed in Italy and made in China. My second set of Rotary brand hoses are porous and leak just as the first original hoses did. I can't imagine buying more hydraulic hoses from Rotary. Would you? What gives? The hydraulic hoses on all of our other farm equipment does not seep and lasts way longer. Have you fixed the problem? I'll be discussing this problem on air tomorrow. Would you like to call in and join the discussion? The on-air radio call-in number is 866-582-9933 between 9 and 11 a.m. Central Time. Thank you, Vincent Finelli, USA Prepares. And it says the website for GCN, www.gcnlive.com/USA Prepares. Thank you, Vincent Finelli, and our phone number. So I thought that Rotary might want to call in and explain exactly why it's a benefit and a feature to have these hoses that seep. It is absolutely ridiculous, in my opinion. And I believe what has happened is they found a cheaper hose in China, and they decided that they would go for the cheaper hose. Now, this is not the cheapest lift there is. This is one of the most expensive. Now, I paid just a little bit more for the Rotary lift because I found a guy who was willing to sell it at a better price than everybody else, and I installed it myself. Now, installing, that's something they'd say is, hey, Vinny, the problem with these hoses seeping is the way you installed them. Well, that's not true. That is absolutely not true. There's only one way to install them, and whether they have their guy install them or whether I install them, they're installed the same way. And the installation has nothing to do with these porous hoses. So if you have a power steering pump on your truck or car, I can guarantee you that that hose does not seep. It doesn't.
Yep.
And if you have a front end loader on your tractor, I can guarantee you that that hose does not seep because it's dangerous.
It is. Especially when you've got, 11 tons sitting up there on the lift?
In our case, it would be
10 tons, 11 tons.
Well, 1,000 pounds, 11,000,
really dangerous.
10,000 pounds. Yeah. Now the good thing is that it has a set of locks. So as you raise the vehicle, when you get up to about 18 inches, the locks engage. It goes click, and that means that there are mechanical locks that stop the lift from falling every time that you pass these locks. Kind of like an elevator. If the elevator cables break, there are these locks that swing out automatically, and they will stop the elevator. Now, it might free fall for several feet, but it's not going to free fall all the way down. And, it'll be gut-wrenching and when the elevator does this, if it ever does. But there are safety features built in, just like with this Rotary lift. And that was one of the reasons why I bought this exact lift, because I liked the way that it had rubbing blocks as bearings, and I liked the way that it had these safety locks, and I liked the way it had these hydraulic pistons, these really long ones. And I liked everything about it. But, one thing I didn't check, can you imagine? One thing I didn't check when I was buying this lift was, so where are your hoses made? Now, this was 11 years ago. So I really thought that a, made in America lift would be made in America. But they use these cheap, substandard hydraulic hoses. So for those of you listening in class today, if you have a rotary lift, and this is, I wasn't going to say this, but because they have not responded to me yet, and it's actually been 2 days, because they haven't responded yet, I decided to mention this worldwide. So if you have a rotary brand lift, and it seems to have check the hoses, see if yours seeps just the way mine does, and I'm pretty sure that if you've got the same vintage hoses, that you've got all the features that we have, including the seeping hoses, that you call Rotary Lift and let them know that you want them to replace them absolutely free. And out of the kindness of your heart, you're not going to charge them for the labor of replacing these hoses, of which it takes 2 people. And it will take at least 1 hour. At least 1 hour. So the average shop rate is probably $100 an hour in the United States. And
per person.
Yeah, per person.
So if it takes 2 people, it'll be $200 an hour.
Right, and then they have to show up at your place, and so if they go port to port in billing, which means port to port means from the minute they leave wherever their office is to the minute they arrive, and do the work and then start the return trip and get home. From when they leave to when they get home, they're billable. So if that's the case, now you're looking at, $400 or $500 labor to change these hoses. Now, the hoses are not that expensive. I know that if I go to like an auto parts store, some auto parts stores have hose making equipment. They have the fittings.
Yeah.
And they have the hoses, and they have the...
You can get custom hoses made.
Yeah, and that's what I would do. Before I bought Rotary brand hoses and said, let's try another set. Let's see if they leak just like the first 2. I would have them custom made. But I really think Rotary should send me a new hose set with an apology. We'll be right back. Gwyneth Isaacs is with us. Gwyneth Isaacs is with us. And I was talking about the Rotary lift problem. And I'm sending Rotary a customer service contact. And so far, all I've said, I haven't clicked the send button yet, but I have not heard from you yet. So I talked about your seeping hydraulic hose problem on the air today. You can hear it at www.gcnlive.com/USA Prepares. And one of the things that they say on their website, their official website, is World's Most Trusted Lift. World's Most Trusted Lift. I wonder what they're going to say about that. I mean, that's a pretty strong claim. I don't trust their hoses. I don't. So I guess everyone trusts them except me. I like the lift. I really do. I believe it's the finest lift in the world, or I wouldn't get under a vehicle with it. Of course, I use a third post. There's 2 posts on the lift, and then I have a jack stand, which is it's got a base. It's pretty heavy metal support. It's a tube that has an adapter on the end to fit in a trailer hitch of a truck, and it's got a threaded, heavy threaded rod. It will support, probably several thousand pounds, and you raise this up under the trailer hitch of a truck, or under the differential of a car, or under a support mechanism if it's a front-wheel drive car. And now you have 3 points, and the vehicle is much more stable and less likely to fall off the lift. But I just wanted to share that. So if you go to Walmart, class, and they're putting tires or something on your vehicle, and their vehicle's up in the air, they use Rotary brand lifts. Walmart does. Now, not exclusively. They have other brands there as well. But your car may be up on a Rotary brand lift, and you may want to say, mind if I look at those hoses, because I sure would not like my car to tip if you have a hydraulic hose failure. And if you do, would you mind putting it on that other brand lift? Because I heard that these hoses seep, and I don't know if that means they're going to fail suddenly or slowly or what. Now, I don't know either. So I just wanted to share that I'm now at the point where when I find a product that I think is inferior, substandard, or should have been made better for our safety, durability, longevity, etc., I'm going to talk about them. I'm going to talk about those companies that make substandard products. Now, Rotary's attorneys can contact me and say, you're using some pretty harsh words, substandard. And I'll say, sure. What would you call a hose that seeps like that? Would you call that standard? Or is that your standard? So if that's your standard, we'll talk about your standard. Or would you say it's below standard? Or would you say it's because we found the lowest cost provider, and that happened to be Chinese, and they use substandard materials? Mm-hmm. So that's the problem. Yeah. That is the problem that we're seeing in many products across the world. So do I have any? I
would say that's about the sum of it.
Yeah. Do I have any desire to buy any hoses that are made in China? So when I go to buy other hoses, hydraulic hoses, at the auto parts store, or if I have them custom made, at a hose fabrication shop, I'm going to ask lots of questions. Like, before you cut that hose out of that box, I'd like to see the label. I'd like to see where it's made. Is it made by Gates, a top quality company? That's typically what I buy, Gates, Gates brand hoses. I like them. I like the Gates brand belts, serpentine belts, V-belts. I like them. I've been using them for years. And I have a high degree of trust with the Gates rubber company. But these unbranded hoses from China, I have no faith in, none. And by the way, just as an aside, I talked with the guy who makes custom hoses for us, and he is a machinist. And so there's a shop where it's about a 40, 50-mile round trip from the farm where I get these hoses. So if a hose were to rub and wear through a contact point in the outer edge of the hose rubs, or there's a flex point like on and I'm talking an old tractor. I bought some hoses for our 1984 John Deere tractor. Well, after being out in the rain and the sun for decades, I had to replace those hoses. Well, those hoses, the guy that made those hoses said, the Chinese hoses that they have on imported Chinese tractors, they only seem to last through the warranty, and then they fail. We're only talking a few years. That's kind of what I'm talking about. And our lift is not out in the sun. It's inside, protected. Gwyneth Isaacs is with us. So here's the latest piece about Rotary Lift. So I'm sending these guys at Rotary a message. They have on their website, rotarylift.com. If you have questions, you can send them a comment. And so I said in the comment box, "Dear Rotary Lift, I've not heard from you yet. So I talked about your seeping hydraulic hose problem on the air today. You can hear it at www.gcnlive.com/USA Prepares. Does anyone read these contacts? Thank you, Vincent Finelli, my phone number." And I gave them my zip code and the email address, and it just was sent just now. So I'll let you know, keep you updated as to whether they respond or not. And then I'm going to call during the next break. I'm going to call their 800 number, which is 800-445-5438, 800-445-5438. And I'm going to ask them what gives. And I'll let you know what they have to say. And I'm going to tell them that no matter what they say, I'm going to report what they say on the air right after I hang up and go back on the air. So I'm going to tell you what they have to say. Bottom line is, I'm not happy with the hoses. I think it's something that should not occur, and I think that literally what they should do is contact their customers and say, "I am so sorry. We are so sorry. We have had this problem. Would it be okay with you, since we've noticed this problem, and it looks like you have one of those hoses, would it be okay if we replace that defective part with a new one?" However, I have a feeling that their lawyers said, and this is just my opinion, and thought that their lawyers said, "Don't do it, don't do it, don't do it, because if you do, that means that we admit that it is our fault." And yes, and then we would assume liability. So don't do it. Just like Chevrolet, when they had that faulty ignition switch problem, and it caused people to die, the lawyers and the statisticians determined that it would be less expensive if they would let people die rather than have this massive recall to fix the switch problem, which they got caught with and they had to recall them anyway. But that's Chevrolet. Ford's no different. Ford had a Pinto that had an extra long bolt right by the gas tank, and if the Ford Pinto in the 1970s was involved in a rear end collision, someone runs into the back of a Ford Pinto, the gas tank would be likely to rupture because of this extra long bolt, and the gas would pour out, and there could be a fire, and people could die. And that happened. So Ford decided, well, we don't need to fix that, and ultimately they got caught in that scandal as well. So it's not just General Motors, it's not just Ford, it's these upper management people who say, you know what, look, it costs more to have two different size bolts, the right size bolt for the gas tank, but we have these other ones, and we use these other ones in these other locations, so let's just stock one bolt. Even though it's long and even though we know it can cause a gas tank rupture, that's okay. That's the kind of stuff that goes on at these high-level decisions. So there was no little person at Rotary, in my opinion, that said, hey, boss, I got a great idea. Let's get a cheap inferior hose from China. Let's do that. I don't believe that happened. I believe that it was
the management decision.
Correct.
Probably an accountant.
Yeah, and that's the guy who runs Laclede Electric Cooperative. He used to be the accountant. Now he's the CEO and general manager, and he's the guy that has been influencing rate increases. So, by the way, if you have an accountant run your company, it is a terrible thing. They forget about the customers. They run by the numbers. Numbers. And when you run by the numbers, you can put your company out of business. And let me give an example. Sears, Kmart, those two corporations have been running by the numbers, and they've been worried about executive compensation first through the stock price. Their main focus is increasing share price, and forget the customers. That's just this, that's just
incidental.
Incidental. That's it. That's the word, incidental. It's incidental to the business, and then Sears is just about done. Kmart, they've been closing stores as fast as they can, and so is Sears. But if you go to a Sears store, they'll tell you, oh, no, we're stronger than ever. Really? How about when they get down to one store? They'll be really strong, right? Oh, by the way, Guineith, the IRS has determined, Mrs. Finelli was telling me that the IRS has determined that if you have a business and you run a loss 3 out of 5 years, the IRS can deem and declare your business a hobby. So that means that Sears is a hobby because... And so is J.C. Penney.
It's a hobby.
Yeah, those are hobby
and
stores.
Probably Target.
Yeah.
Target. If there's one thing that's worse than an accountant running a shop, it's probably when a bunch of SJWs run your shop. And
Tell us what SJWs are.
Social justice warriors. And a little while back in the U.S., this was just media reports that I saw over the internet. Apparently, the management at Target decided to do away with the boys and girls clothes sections and the boys and girls toys sections, because to acknowledge that there were differences between boys and girls was not politically correct. Did you hear that one?
Yeah, and well, I was looking through some of my old toys that I bought, saved my money when I was younger, and I bought it came from England back in the 1960s. It was a steam engine, and it was the coolest thing. You literally had this boiler, and you put in I forget what the chemical is, but you would put in this brick that would ignite, and it would cause a controlled flame. It would heat the water in this little tiny boiler, and the boiler was about the size of maybe 4 inches long by 1.5 inches, 2 inches in diameter. Put a little bit of water in there. The fire would heat the boiler, create steam, and it would move this piston, which would turn a a wheel, like on a locomotive, steam locomotive. And that's all it did. And so I thought that was a boy's toy. Now, maybe it's a boy's and a girl's toy, but I was interested in mechanics, mechanical things.
Yeah,
now, I'm sure you would have loved that.
I don't think that there's any way that Target would ever be able to sell a toy like that today.
Yeah.
They would be absolutely terrified of liability claims, selling children toy locomotives that you actually put a fire in to play with.
Yeah, well, not only that, not only the fire, but the steam, 212 degree steam,
and the pressure.
Fahrenheit.
What if the kid forgets to put the water in?
Yeah,
because
and then
would not think to put water in a boiler.
Right. Here's another toy I have. I'm looking in the studio to see if it's behind me. I've moved it a couple times. It was a generator, and it had a little crank, and you had 3 permanent magnets in the shape of a U, and an armature, and a commutator, and 2 gears, a large gear and a small gear, and you would turn the crank on the large gear, and it would spin the armature with the windings on it that rotated through the magnet, and it would generate electricity. Now, you could generate maybe 70 or 80 volts with this. So, I mean, if you put your tongue on the contacts, you cool. you could shock yourself. But yeah, and I know that when you were little, you'd probably love to play with one of those too. So, is that a boy's toy? I don't know. It's for someone who is interested in electrical power generation and mechanics, and so maybe it's not the typical girl's toy. Maybe it would be more inclined to be used by a boy. However, I think, Guineith, you are the exception. I think your interest in everything.
I would very much like the electricity generator. My dad was a master engineer, who was his mentor, the fellow who basically taught him how to be an engineer, was a fellow by the name of Cyril Carter. It happened to be his uncle, his dad's brother. And Cyril Carter was the chief engineer of Western Australia, and back in the day built most of the city of Perth's original electrical grid. And so my dad was one of the best engineers in the country, and he had a workshop at home, of course, once he retired, and he spent his retirement building model steam locomotives, specializing in Rogers locomotives. And for anyone out there in the class who wants to know what a Rogers locomotive looks like, go and watch an old Californian Western, and you'll see the locomotive with the big cow catcher and the big fancy chimney and the fancy walnut cab, and that's probably a Rogers locomotive, and they were very, very fine locomotives. And I'm thinking especially, it's actually quite a modern Western, but there's a TV series was made in recent times called Hell on Wheels. And it was a dramatization of the building of the California Railway. And that has a beautiful Rogers locomotive in it. And I was quite excited when I saw it because, of course, I recognized it instantly. But it's the same thing. Actually, those toy steam engines, you can still buy them, but their market is steered at the small hobbyist, and the advertising is not directed at children anymore. But you can still get them if you look for them online.
They used to be sold
in Germany.
They used to be sold in a department store. Right, they are not made in China. So, Guineith, when we come back, let's just take a few minutes and talk about the purchase of toys may have a dramatic impact in what a child becomes or is interested in and pursues as a passion later in life. We'll be right back. 5 minutes and 22 seconds on hold. And I was unable to talk to somebody from Rotary Lift. I did call during the break. Thank you for calling Rotary products. Thank you for being a loyal customer. We appreciate your patience. Due to high call volumes, we're experiencing delays before a consultant can be with you. So that's as far as I got. And so I'll keep trying. Maybe after the broadcast. And the number I called for Rotary to not have someone answer the phone was, or to be able to talk to someone, was 800-445-5438. So I'm really frustrated with Rotary. I can't seem to get anybody on the phone in a reasonable amount of time. And all I did was get the automated, prompts telling me that they appreciate my loyalty and that they're experiencing high call volumes. Now, I wonder if they're experiencing high call volumes because all of their customers, or many of their customers, have these hoses.
They're going and checking their lifts.
Yeah, maybe they're going to check their lifts and they go, whoa, yeah, mine's leaking too. So anyway, I will.
Unacceptable.
It's unacceptable. Defective products, in my opinion. So we're talking about toys and the influence that parents have through the selection of what they encourage their children to play with, if you will, or to encourage their additional learning. And in my case, my parents thought that, instead of little trinkets, instead of balloons and things like that, which we never had in my house, we didn't have desserts. We only had meals of substance, of quality in terms of not expensive necessarily, but in terms of healthy. Yeah, we had that. And we didn't have soda. We didn't have candy. But I guess my parents would rather that I had learning-type tools rather than fun-type tools. And to me, they were fun, but, maybe most people say, oh, wow, an electronics set, well, that's no fun. But I had a Heathkit electronic board that had capacitors and resistors and variable capacitor and a solar cell and an electric motor and an instruction book that would let you build, over 100 different circuits with wires and spring clips and so forth. And then, of course, that steam engine and the generator. So those are, and I still have them. I still have these toys from the 1950s and the 1960s. So maybe that encouraged me to be the person I am today, interested in everything. Everything. Yeah. What are your thoughts, Guineith?
Well, I'll tell you what, my favorite place to hang out when I was a little girl was Dad's workshop. Okay? Dad's workshop was locked unless he was in it. But if he was there doing something, he said, see that step? You can sit there, you can watch me, but do not move into the rear of me. Do not sneak up behind me. He said, but you see that step? Sit there, watch what I'm doing by all means. I'm happy to talk to you about what I'm doing. But you don't get in behind me, because if I need to step back suddenly and I bump into you behind me, it's going to get bad very, very quickly. He said, if I have to step back, I don't want to have to be tripping over you. So there's the step, sit there, watch me, talk with me, we can hang out and all that, but, don't get in my way. And that was his policy. And it was actually really good, because I learned a phenomenal amount about locomotive engineering. Just sitting there watching him and asking questions. Now, what were my favourite toys? I'd like to go into that on the other side of the top of the hour break.
Yeah, and how they shaped your life.
Yeah.
And how those favorite toys shaped your life. And then are we going to talk about Bitcoin and what's going on with Bitcoin as well?
I think we will, yep. And mud brick houses.
Okay. Yeah.
Yep.
And mud brick houses. Yeah, and the repairs. And I've got some questions about how does rain impact a mud brick house? And how are the walls finished on the inside? Guineith Isaacs is with us. She's off-grid in Australia. Link on the website under the instructors tab if you want to contact her. We'll be back. Everyone all set? Cocked? Locked? Here we go. Hour number 2 of USA Prepares. Guineith Isaacs is with us. I just got off the phone with Nate of Rotary Lift, and I mentioned that I had a problem with these hoses on hour number 1 with Guineith, and I just described it in somewhat in detail. And Nate was very, very kind, very polite, and he wanted the serial number. Of course, I didn't have that in front of me. I had the model number, but not the serial number. And so he gave me another email address, and I'm going to send that to him. I told him in just over an hour when I get off the air for the second hour. And he said, yeah, they seep. After a couple of years they seep, but that's really not a problem. I said, oh, yes, it is. Yes, it is a problem.
Yeah.
Because I don't have that problem with any other hydraulic hoses. Now, I've had... Isn't that interesting? Isn't that interesting? Just as I said that, I got red bars, which meant that you didn't hear what I just said. So let me say it again. More red bars. These are interruptions in the broadcast. So I said to Nate at Rotary Lift that he mentioned to me that seeping is not really a big problem. It's not a common... Well, it happens a lot. It happens across all lift brands. And I said, is that because the hoses are made in China? And he didn't have the answer for that. But he said, he indicated it's not really that serious. And I said, oh, yes, it is.
It's not acceptable.
Yes, it is, because...
Any hose to leak or weep or anything. It indicates imminent catastrophic failure. That's what it indicates.
That's how I see it, Guineith.
Hydraulic hose. Mm-hmm. It just does.
And then I told him that the first set of hoses did the same thing. They were replaced by Rotary, and he asked me which dealer. I said, no, by you guys. Corporate headquarters sent me new hoses, and he said, well, we don't do that. I said, well, yeah, you did. So now we have an issue where I don't think he believes me. Well, I'm not making it up. I got the hoses from corporate headquarters. They didn't want to warranty them the first time, but they did. But I have a feeling this is what happened. They bought a bunch of hoses from China. This is my conjecture. They bought a bunch of hoses from China, and when I got the replacement, it came from the same Chinese factory as the first set, and that's why I got the same leaking problem that I had at first. And I told them that these have been seeping for years, and it's unacceptable. And none of the other hoses have seeped. And I did a quick calculation of the hoses. Now, we had a bunch of hydraulic hose failures, a bunch of them, but this is different, and let me explain why. We have a little John Deere tractor. It's 40 horsepower. It has a hydraulic front-end lift. Now, this lift goes up and down, tilts, and goes up and down. So there's a lot of movement of the hoses. The tractor's outside in the fields a lot. Now, the tractor was built in 1991. That's 15 years of service before the hoses failed a couple of years ago when we had, a lot of hose failures. But the hoses fail in the steering system where the wheels are turned left, right. They swivel up and down on a pivot point on the front axle. So there's a lot of movement in these hoses, and they're outside. But they lasted 24 years. Okay? These hoses are inside. Don't get much sunlight on them at all unless someone opens the garage door. Now, and they don't move. The hoses do not move at all. The hoses are stationary. They don't move. It's not like they turn left, right, go up or down. They're out of the sun, they're stationary, and they seep. And I told them that none of the other hydraulic hoses we have has any kind of problem like this. None of the other hydraulic hoses seeps. And I told them that we have a Caterpillar bulldozer, we have a backhoe, we have a bunch of tractors, and I said the hoses don't seep at all, none. Now they've burst from movement failure where they go up and down and there's flexing in them, and that's what happens to the hydraulic hoses. But none of them seeps, not one, ever. So I think they've got a problem, and they know, Rotary knows, they admitted, they seep. That's unacceptable. And he said they seep after a couple years. That's exactly right. They seep after a couple years. Yeah. But it's unacceptable. And if they know, they seep,
materials and they're subject to catastrophic sudden failure, when that's what it means.
If they know, I agree.
Hydraulic line weeps.
And you know what they could say to me? They could say, Mr. Finelli, are you a hydraulic engineer? You know, to shut me down right then and there. And I'd say, no, I'm not a hydraulic. Are you? Because the person on the other end of the phone will not be a hydraulic engineer either. And the other thing I would say is, I don't have to be a hydraulic engineer. I don't have I don't drink from a coffee mug that leaks or seeps. I don't have one. Mm-hmm. Not one coffee mug in our entire house seeps. Not one.
Yep.
So why is it acceptable that a hydraulic hose that puts a vehicle up in the air that you walk under that seeps, why would that be acceptable? Plus, if you're just joining us, I'm talking about, I'm annoyed with Rotary brand lifts. Rotary, Rotary, and they say that they are, let me just go to their website and I'll read it. Trying to get to page number 1. Here we go. Is it going? It's going. Rotary lifts. The world's most trusted lift. That's what they say. The world's most trusted lift. Well, I trust the lift. I just don't trust their hoses, which I guess means I don't trust their lift. Okay. So that's the story about where we are so far.
I think the best answer there is to contact a hose shop and get some custom hoses made and make sure that the line is not manufactured in China, that it's German-made or American-made or whatever line, and that it's not made in China. Yeah. But I would like to talk about my favorite toys. Yeah.
I'd love to hear that. I have just one quick comment. As you were saying that, I was thinking that I have a 1968 antique automobile in the garage, and this 1968 automobile has the original hydraulic hoses, the original ones, and they don't leak, and they don't seep. Yep. No. Okay, so back to toys. Yep. Back to toys.
Okay. Now, of course, I was a little girl, and I was provided with an assortment of dollies and teddies. Okay, and many of them became favourites. But I would say that my favourite toy was my little purple wheelbarrow. I used to get that wheelbarrow, and I used to just wheel it up and down and all around the place. And then, Dad or Mum would be chopping wood. They both used to chop wood. And they would say, "Here, Jenny." And they would give me a few pieces of wood for me to put in the wheelbarrow. And they'd say, "Take it up to the back door." And then I would toddle along, literally, because I would be like 2, and toddle with my little wheelbarrow with the bits of wood in it up to the back door and put them near the back door ready to be taken in, and then go back down and get some more wood from where Mum or Dad was chopping wood on the chopping pile. And, that's, or if there was nothing in particular to cart around, I would just walk around with my wheelbarrow empty. But if Dad was working on an excavation project on the land, he would put some rocks or some soil into the wheelbarrow, and he would show me where the rock or the soil place was, which is generally around the other side of the house. And he would tell me to go and put that on the soil pile, and he would have his big wheelbarrow that he would be filling up, and I would have my little wheelbarrow. And, of course, my little wheelbarrow could only probably take a shovelful of soil or just a few rocks. And but I have these memories. And, that I would say that's definitely influenced who I've become, because now, one of my favourite things to do on this land is to do excavations to make the land better. I do a type of farming called permaculture, and a big part of that is making swales, which trenches on contour to collect the water as it flows down the hillside, And they used to make these in the U.S. during the Depression basically to give the men something to do. And some of these, trenches on contour, they're all still there. There's hundreds of kilometres of them all over the United States, but especially in California, and especially in other arid areas of the United States like Arizona and around where they had the Dust Bowl. But I would say that's definitely influenced who I have become. And another thing that I used that was another form of play was I would get to make gardens. And this was in Rotary, where it rains 3 times a week in New Zealand. And, very, very different to living here, very different to growing things here. But I would do that, and I would get given I would usually not get my own piece of ground, but I would get given some seeds and pointed at a piece of ground and told to go and plant them, which I would duly do, and I would take great delight in watching my little plants grow, and they would help to contribute to the food supply of the house. And, my parents were... they were actually Depression-era parents, okay, so they weren't baby boomers. I was born in 1974, and my mum was
hold that thought.
when I was born.
Hold that thought. Hold that thought. We'll be right back. Guineith Isaacs is with us, and I got the serial number and the model number of the rotary lift. I'm going to send that to Nate during the next break, and I'll let you know what happens with the hydraulic hose seeping problem. So, Guineith, we were talking about toys, and I just want to share with you that Mrs. Finelli has asked me to find for her a replacement wheelbarrow. I'm very serious about that. She's been asking me to find one for her that I think would be satisfactory in terms of design, construction. And here's the problem. The problem is that you can buy an Ames, A-M-E-S brand, contractor's wheelbarrow with a single wheel up front, but the darn tires are made in China. And they've got... and why would I want to buy a contractor's wheelbarrow, a heavy-duty wheelbarrow that'll last, another couple of decades, when they have these crappy Chinese rubber tires? If you go to Harbor Freight and you buy a hand truck, and just try this next time you're in the Chinese factory tool outlet, Harbor Freight class, just spin the wheels on the hand trucks that they have, and they're not straight, they wobble, they're out of round. Yes, brand new. I needed a hand truck to move some furniture, and I literally tilted back with our son. I said, will you tilt this back while I rotate these wheels, and I want to see if I can find just one out of the 10 or 12 that they had stacked up there.
Don't wobble.
Yeah. So you've seen this too? I
have. It's a big problem. I prefer wheelbarrows that have a solid tire, or the old-fashioned steel-wheeled wheelbarrows. I have one of those, and unfortunately the bucket on it is just about gone. But if I could possibly do a new bucket for it, that would be great, because the frame itself is fairly solid and it has a steel front wheel. Solid. What I mean by solid steel is the rim is solid and it has spokes, 4 spokes going, to the outside, from the hub to the outside. But the tire itself is a solid piece of steel. And I think that that's absolutely marvelous. There's nothing more irritating in my book than a pneumatic-tired wheelbarrow. That's the most stupid idea, and I can't think why anybody ever thought of it to do that. When the solid rubber tires, they'll last for 20 years, But these, and especially the plastic wheels, it's just irritating. You see them, and this wheelbarrow, it might cost like $150 or whatever. Brand new, beautiful wheelbarrow, and it's got a blooming plastic wheel with a pneumatic tire.
Okay, let's extrapolate that. Extrapolate.
The only thing I can think of is to put some of that green goo in them that you put in your your car tires.
Yeah. In the United States, that's called slime. SLIME. That's what they call it here.
It's called slime here too, but I call it green goo.
Yeah, and what Guineith is talking about is when you have a puncture or a hole in your pneumatic tire, meaning a tire filled with air and it leaks, and you're tired of pumping up those tires. Depending on the size of the hole, you may be able to use slime, this green liquid that will tend to fill up the holes and stop the leaks. But there are problems with using the slime, and that is it gets all over the inside of the wheel, where the rubber contacts the wheel. Now, it can seal the seeps between the bead of the tire and the rim of the wheel. But it's a mess when you go to work on that tire again and replace the tire on that same wheel, because that slime is in there, and you may have to get it off, which means a wire brush and more work. So, yeah, this is a problem. And the plastic wheels on lawnmowers, they don't last very long. We'll be right back. Guineith Isaacs is with us, and Jay in Missouri. Welcome. You're on the air with Guineith Isaacs.
Hey, Vince. Long time no hear. First of all, y'all's call-in listening line still not working, but
yeah, and there's nothing I can do about that. I've contacted them. I've asked our class to contact them. I can't fix that. I just can't fix it. So if you noticed, I don't give out the listen line number anymore. I'm not going to subject our class to that. That's Xeno Radio. If they want to fix it, great. I'd love to have them fix it, but I can't make it happen. They don't pay any attention to me.
Hey, you were talking about the lift trucks and the wheelbarrows and everything. And you had mentioned Harbor Freight Tools. I go to Harbor Freight Tools, but I don't get certain things at Harbor Freight just because of the fact that something my dad taught me when I was real young. There are some things you get what you pay for. I mean, there's a difference between a Ryobi cordless drill and a Makita cordless drill.
Absolutely.
One is just going to stand up better because of the fact of how it's made.
When you say Ryobi, when you say Ryobi, class, just for your information, a lot of the 18-volt cordless tools that are sold by Sears under the Craftsman label are made by Ryobi. And I got to tell you that they don't hold a candle. And I have one of these Sears Craftsman Ryobi manufactured cordless drills that was just... I'm disappointed that I bought it, okay? It does not compare to our Milwaukee brand cordless drill. No comparison at all. As a matter of fact, I don't even know where the Sears Craftsman Ryobi cordless drill is. I don't even use it. And I wouldn't even buy replacement battery pack for it. And our friend has a DeWalt brand, a competitor of Milwaukee, and I think his is fine as well. I like the DeWalt. I kind of like the Milwaukee better, but the Sears Craftsman, it's lousy. And when you talk about Harbor Freight and you compare Harbor Freight tools to others, I got to tell you that a lot of the tools that Craftsman branded tools now are made in China.
Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, Now, you could go to Snap-on tools. And Snap-on tools, as you know, they are the absolute best on the market. And, of course, you're going to get what you pay for. If you buy you can go to Harbor Freight and you can buy a impact wrench and you can use it around the yard, change your tires, rotate your tires. But if you're going to be doing something industrial, you may want to go with a Snap-on, pay the extra $100, $200, and have something that's going to last for a very long time.
Jay, let me make a comment. So our neighbor, who has a farm, has a Harbor Freight pneumatic impact wrench. That's one of these things that you, class, if you're not sure what I'm talking about and what Jay's talking about, it's one of these tools that you see the tire changing places use on the lug nuts. Now, you shouldn't use them on there, but to tighten the lug nuts, but they do. And our neighbor has one that he wants to use to change the blades so he can sharpen them on his riding mower. And the Harbor Freight compressor and the Harbor Freight hose and the Harbor Freight impact wrench are not strong enough to loosen the bolts on the blade of his lawnmower. There you have it.
Anybody surprised?
So, yeah. Now, Jay, you mentioned Snap-on tools. I have a comment. So I just typed in price of Snap-on screwdrivers. Now this has free shipping. Free shipping. Now you can get the entire set of screwdrivers, that'd be Flat and Phillips, for $299.95 for 12 screwdrivers. Now that's a bit pricey for a lot of people, including me. Now over the years I have collected a couple Snap-on screwdrivers. I still have them. I probably paid $5 for a used Snap-on slotted screwdriver and a Phillips, $5 each back, I'm talking in the 1970s, and $5 for a used screwdriver back then was a lot, a real lot, compared to the Craftsman that you can get for $1.79 when Craftsman was made in the United States and had a lifetime guarantee. But you're right, Craftsman is absolutely top of the line, and I only have a couple, just a handful of Snap-on tools, because they're so darn pricey. They really are. Just to put an exclamation point on this, class, if you've seen those roll-around toolboxes that mechanics have, and if you see one that says Snap-on, you can probably find a used Snap-on roll-around toolbox used for about $5,000. And that's without the tools. Yeah. Snap-on is really, really, really expensive. And it's the best of the best of the best.
Yeah.
So, you're right, Jay.
Yeah, but now you were mentioning screwdrivers. Now, just my opinion, you can go to Harbor Freight, buy a set of screwdrivers, and it will do exactly the same job as a Snap-on or a Craftsman. But you're not doing something industrial with those. You're just tinkering around the house.
Right.
But,
that's right.
For other applications like a cordless drill or an impact wrench or air compressor, you may want to go to something top of the line, to something that's going to last, and you get what you pay for.
Well, hopefully, my son has that same expression, you get what you pay for. Sometimes I think that's true. Hopefully, most of the time it's true, but sometimes you get ripped off too, right? But
true.
These Snap-on, I found that a set of 8 Snap-on screwdrivers used, greasy, used, $99.99, $100 plus $10 shipping for 8 Snap-on screwdrivers. Now, you can get a vintage black screwdriver handle, Snap-on. Vintage, meaning from the 70s or 60s. $49.95, $49.99 for the plastic handle of a screwdriver. It's really pricey. It really is. Now, it doesn't make sense for me, even though I do some industrial work. And, I do have some Harbor Freight screwdrivers, but I haven't bought them. They come free. They come in a 4-pack. When you buy something there, they have a coupon, you get free screwdrivers. So I accept their gift. And I put them in in my toolkit in the car. So I have a set of these 4 screwdrivers, 2 Phillips, 2 slotted in a bag, a tool bag in each car or truck in case I have to do any service. And I have some Harbor Freight deep well sockets as well, because they're $11 for a full set of sockets. Now, am I going to use them every day? Probably not. But in an emergency, I sure like the idea of having a $5.99 complete metric wrench set and a $5.99 complete SAE wrench set in the maybe I might use it in the trunk of each vehicle. I like that idea. But in terms of tools, unfortunately, most of the tools that you would buy today are from China, and we have been sold out. There used to be great tools. I wanted to buy a swivel head ratchet to change spark plugs,
right,
and I didn't like any of the Chinese ones. I could have bought a Chinese one at Harbor Freight for less than half of the price that I bought a used one made by New Britain, a U.S. manufacturer that was built in the 1970s. I paid probably 3 times as much for that ratchet as I could have gotten one at Harbor Freight, an equivalent ratchet, because I wanted the one that was made in USA. So I'm with you.
You
yes.
know something? Many years ago, when I was working as a corporate PA, one of the jobs that I had was I had to look after my boss's Mercedes-Benz, and it was a Mercedes C180. And I realized, as I was looking after this car, that Mercedes has a very, very good policy. With every car they sell, they put a toolkit in it.
Yes, and a first aid kit.
And a first aid kit. If you can find a used Mercedes toolkit, okay, sometimes, people say, I've got my own tools, I don't need the toolkit. If you could go online and get a hold of a used Mercedes toolkit from a Mercedes-Benz, you'll find that the quality of tools that they put into Mercedes toolkits is excellent. They're German engineered, and they're absolutely top of the line. That might be the answer to your problem.
Yeah.
So
Jay,
you'll be able to
I want to thank you.
on eBay.
Yeah. Jay, thank you for your call.
Thank you.
Okay, there goes Jay, probably in his truck. And yes, I have one of those Mercedes tool kit rolls in each one of our Mercedes. And in class, I like Mercedes.
Aren't they great?
And I buy them. Yes, and what I pay for the Mercedes that I buy is less than the original owner paid for the sales tax on that very same Mercedes. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, you can buy a used Mercedes. Okay, the last one I bought, I paid $3,000 for it. And it's a diesel, and it gets 47 miles to the gallon on the highway, and it's an E-Class, E300. My favorite car. Guineith Isaacs is with us. Guineith, here's a topic you want to talk about, Bitcoin, in the last few minutes. So I just saw my I saw my son just a couple of minutes ago. I ran down to the kitchen to say hi to everybody, and he said, "Hey, Dad, you're not going to believe this, but one of my friend's grandmothers was told she bought some cryptocurrency." And she was told by her bank that she better get rid of her cryptos or she won't be able to bank with them anymore. He said, but check it out first. So I went to the internet, and Coinbase confirms that four banks are blocking Bitcoin credit card purchases very quickly.
They are.
They are. J.P. Morgan Chase.
All over the world.
Bank of America.
All the big 4 banks. Yep, Bank of America.
Yes.
The whole 9 yards. Yep.
Yes.
They are.
Yes. Absolutely true. I verified it several sources just now.
Yep. Yeah.
So, class, we want to know for J.P. Morgan Chase, Bank of America, Citi, and Capital One, at least. So they're worried. They're worried.
But they absolutely are worried. But you've got to realize Bitcoin's not going anywhere. Okay, it's not going away. They're not going to be able to kill it. And the funniest thing is that while at the retail banking level they are having diarrhea because of this, they really are. It's really affecting their bowels. At the reserve banking level, they are absolutely 100% behind Bitcoin being the world's digital gold, okay, and store of value into the 21st century and beyond, cryptocurrencies. And you can check that out as well, especially in Switzerland. Yeah, there's been a major crypto enterprise has begun recently in Switzerland. The name of it just escapes me at the moment, but it's got a lot of the big Swiss central bankers and private banks on board, including companies like Credit Suisse. And when you've got these sorts of companies on board, you can be sure that cryptocurrencies are not going to zero anytime soon. What you're seeing at the moment is a correction, okay? It's probably going to last until, I think, about May or June. And I sent you there's an illustration out there. It's all over the internet. It's called the Wall Street Cheat Sheet, okay? I sent an image of that to you earlier, comparing the Wall Street cheat sheet to the Bitcoin chart, and about how they are almost exactly the same, dip for dip, rise for rise. And then I sent you another illustration, which was a screenshot of today of the Bitfinex Bitcoin exchange, and that was probably just a few hours ago. Probably about 8 p.m. or 9 p.m. our time, so probably about 5 hours before the broadcast. And, that even the most recent updates, almost exactly in line with the Wall Street cheat sheet. So what that says is this is normal for assets to do this, okay? Many assets have done this. And when they do this, what Bitcoin's doing at the moment, you can bet your bottom dollar they're going to recover, okay? But you just have to hodl, as Bitcoin people say, HODL. And, I'm not, I've got things that I need to purchase fairly soon, and I'll have to use some of my Bitcoins to purchase them. But I'm not planning on getting out of Bitcoin anytime soon. And in fact, I'm going to be setting up new mining ventures into the future. That's about Bitcoin. And I'm very sorry I couldn't get into what the mud bricks were doing.
Guineith, hey, thank you so much for being with us today. I'll see you next week.